Ms. Arias, please take the stand.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury. The defendant and all counsel, Mr. Martinez, you may continue with cross-examination.
Ma'am, yesterday you told us that after your experience or your time in Ehrenberg with Mr. Alexander that you felt like a prostitute, right?
Yes.
But you've made other statements with regard to your experiences in Ehrenberg, haven't you?
Yes.
Let's take a look at an exhibit, which is exhibit number, get that from the clerk. It's exhibit 490, which comes from your an excerpt from your conversation on May 10th of 2008 with Mr. Alexander. Let's listen to it and see if that's your voice, and then we'll move it in.
And it goes away quickly, the body absorbs it. Okay, well, you just keep spreading it on as you need it, and you keep sliding around. Remember the first time that you and I grinded at Ehrenberg, and we both, I ended up just coming, and you're like, whoa, I came. You came at the same time. I looked around, and there's just jizz, all over. It was so hot. We came together. That was so cool.
Oh, Ehrenberg.
Yeah. Think about that when you drive through there.
Oh, yeah. Always.
So do I.
Ma'am, that's your voice on there, right?
Yes.
And that's you and Mr. Alexander discussing what may have happened in Ehrenberg, correct?
Yes. What did happen?
Pardon?
What did happen?
What happened in Ehrenberg then, right?
Yes.
And you were talking in very fond tones about that experience in this clip that we just played, weren't you?
Yes.
And it was because it was fun, right?
Yes.
And it was something that you enjoyed, right?
Yes.
So when you tell us that you felt like a prostitute, it really does, it seems to be contradicted by what's on Exhibit 490, right?
Not if you understand why I said that.
Well, you do say that you enjoyed the visit to Ehrenberg, correct?
Yes.
You do enjoy the sex in Ehrenberg, correct?
Yes.
I move for the admission of Exhibit 490.
Objection.
490 is admitted.
And you also had another conversation involving Ehrenberg with people from 48 Hours, right?
Yes.
Let me have that marked as an exhibit. I move for the admission of Exhibit 491.
No additional objection, Your Honor.
491 is admitted.
Just tell me more about him. What was it that was special about him?
He really was an amazing person to know. He was generous, one of the most generous people that I've ever encountered. There was one point where we were in Ehrenberg. I think that's Arizona. It's right on the border of Arizona or California. It's Ehrenberg. And we were driving up. We were hitting the freeway to go to a movie theater. And we stopped at the stop sign to get onto the freeway, and there was a lady there holding a sign. I don't remember if it said, "We'll work for food," or "Hungry," or "God bless," or something like that. But either way, he pulled over. We were in his BMW, rolled down the window, and he said, "Are you hungry?" And she said, "Yeah." And so with that, he turns around, and we go to Wendy's, and we get the triple decker that Wendy's sells, and the biggie fries, and the biggest drink that you could get. And we drove back and gave it to her, and she was really grateful. And she just went over and sat down away from the freeway and started eating and had dinner that night. So just little examples like that. That's just one of so many that people could tell you about his generosity. So there were so many attractive qualities about him. He was very kind. When I moved to Mesa originally, I downsized from a house to a room. And I didn't have a place to put my art. I didn't have a place to put my books and some of the things that were really precious to me. So he allowed me to use, he had so much storage available in his home, so he allowed me to use a lot of that storage to put things in his home, in his garage, or in his closet, in his office, things like that. So and it wasn't even a question. He was just like, put it at my house, you know. It wasn't like he was doing me this big favor. It was just like, of course, you know, why think twice about it? So he never was showy about how generous he was. It just was like second nature to him.
Ma'am, when you first described this visit to Ehrenberg, you told us something that was a little bit different than what we heard right now, right?
Yes, according to the questions I was asked.
Well, yes or no?
Yes.
And you told us about going to Sizzler, right?
Yes.
You told us about him grabbing your rear end, right?
Yes.
You told us about the sexual encounters, right?
Yes.
You told us that really wasn't a romantic weekend at all.
No, it wasn't.
And in fact, the indication from you, from the witness stand, was that this was a pretty bad weekend all the way around, wasn't it?
No, I didn't say that.
Well, your indication was that all he wanted was sex, right?
It seemed that way.
Well, if it seemed that way, that was your belief, right?
Not at the time, but in retrospect, yes.
So, as you said here today, it looked like, or not looked like, all he wanted was sex, right?
Mostly.
Well,
Not all,
is it
but
yes or no?
mostly. Mostly.
And when you got there, according to you, that's the first thing that happened, right?
Yes.
And then you guys sat around at some point and started to look at TV, or watch TV, correct?
Yes.
And at some point you went out to dinner, right?
Yes.
And at another point you went to the movies, right?
Yes.
And you indicated that, well, to you, that was, the way you said it, it wasn't a very romantic weekend, right?
Not overly romantic. In fact, there wasn't really any romance that
Ma'am,
weekend.
I'm not asking you to embellish right now. I'm asking you whether or not you told us before that it was not a romantic weekend. That's what you said on direct, correct?
Yes.
And you didn't tell us about this circumstance where he stopped and he gave this woman this burger from Wendy's either, did you?
No.
It appears that there are two sides to what went on in Ehrenberg, doesn't it?
No.
Well, it appears that there's the side that we just heard from where you enjoyed the sex, right?
Yes.
A side where you and he were driving around, correct?
Yes.
And he helped some homeless person, right?
I think she was homeless.
Well, it's somebody that was standing there at the side of the road, right?
Yes.
And with some sort of sign. And it looks like this is based on what we heard from the previous excerpt. It looks like you were sort of reminiscing back on May 10th of 2008, reminiscing in a very positive fashion, right?
May 10th, 2000. Oh, yes. I was.
That's the phone call that we just listened to prior to this.
Yes.
And it looked like you were reminiscing in a very positive fashion, right?
Yes.
Not the same picture that you presented previously with regard to the Ehrenberg meeting, correct?
I was asked about a different time frame.
Ma'am.
So then that would be correct.
So the answer is that is correct, then,
Yes.
right? One of the other things that was presented in this case was that it appeared that Mr. Alexander, from what you presented, was an individual that was totally into sex, correct?
Yes.
And that's when he was with you, correct?
Me and other girls.
Well, had you ever been in a bedroom with him and another girl,
Yes.
and the three of you had sex?
No.
So when you say that he had sex with other women, you really don't know if that's true or not, do you?
If he was telling me the truth, then it's true.
Well, ma'am, I'm not asking you what he told you. I'm asking from your personal experience in terms of the situations that you know about. You don't really know of any other circumstances where he had sex with anybody else, right?
I do know.
And you're talking because you were there and you were watching his penis go inside them. Is that what you're saying?
No.
You're just telling us that because of some conversations that you may have had with somebody else, correct?
Him.
Other people, right?
Just one person.
And as we know, people don't lie, do they?
That's not necessarily true.
Well, no, people don't lie. That's what you're telling us right now because you're saying that somebody told me, then it must be true.
I said if,
Ma'am, you're saying that it's based on what somebody told you, right?
based on what Travis told me, yes.
And people have a tendency to embellish things sometimes, don't they?
Yes.
Just like you in this case, correct?
Not on the stand, but in this case, yes.
Haven't you lied from the very start of this case until, according to you, you got on the witness stand?
No.
Well, you're saying that you're not lying here, that what you're telling us is the truth, right?
Yes.
But you are telling us that when you spoke with the detective, that that wasn't true, correct? Whatever it is that you told him.
Well, some things were not true. Most things.
Most things were true? Is that what you're saying?
Some things were not true.
Did you lie to the detective, yes or no?
Yes.
And did you lie to him on 2 occasions?
More than 2, yes.
Well, I'm talking about 2 dates. Did you lie to him
Yes.
on 2 dates? And did you also lie to 48 hours?
Yes.
Did you lie to people in Utah?
Yes.
Did you lie to Daniel Freeman?
Yes, everyone.
Right, so you lied to a lot of people, but you're saying that just because you are sitting here in this courtroom, there has been, for lack of a better term, a conversion, and you're now telling the truth, right?
For lack of a better term, yes.
And the same thing with regard to whatever Mr. Alexander tells you, everything that he says, you believe, right?
Not necessarily.
Well, but you do believe the part about the sexual encounters, right?
Yes.
Did you ever talk to the women that were involved to confirm it?
No.
So you don't have any confirmation from these women as to whether or not it happened, right?
No.
And it appears, however, though, that this sexual interest that he had was directed towards you, wasn't it?
Some of it.
No, most of it, or all of it. Wasn't it directed towards you?
Not all of it. Some of it. Most of it. I don't know. Maybe during the time we were together, most of it. I don't know.
Well, let's take a look at and see what was said during May 10th of 2008 about that. And I'll ask you after I play it to see whether or not that is your voice and whether it is part of the previous stuff that was played.
We ask that it be moved to be admitted before it's published.
Then I'll move for the admission of Exhibit 492.
No objection.
492 is admitted.
Yeah, you are right, though, that in the bath. Oh, that was hot.
Oh, when we took a bath together?
Uh-huh.
That was surreal, like, honestly. And I think, maybe the candlelight and the bubbles all had something to do with it, but you were amazing. You made me feel like a goddess. Like, I wasn't saying you were, like, worshiping me, but you made me feel like I was the most freaking beautiful woman on the whole planet. Like, I so felt like I was the goddess. And so, aside from all those warm, fuzzy feelings, but, like, it was so sexy, and it was so hot, and, oh, gosh.
Well, that wasn't hard to make you feel that way because you were freaking, you were hot. You are serious, honey. I don't want to force you right now for that. Start touching yourself.
I am already.
I just started.
I wish those were my hands giving you a hand job.
Honey, so, like, before I met you, I never checked off. But once I started meeting, I don't know, once a month, once every 2 weeks. Like, since you've left, I check off every day, sometimes 2-3 times a day.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Well, it's always just a fucking
Oh, please, love me right now. I wish you were here. If you were here, my grandparents are asleep, I'd let you right into my bedroom. We'd shut and lock the door, and we would just have a big fuck fest. We'd go at it all night.
That is your voice, right?
Yes.
And that's him telling you that in terms of his sexual activity, masturbation specifically, he didn't masturbate before he met you, right?
No, he didn't say that. He said he hardly ever did.
Well, ma'am, perhaps we should listen to it again so we can hear it. And you're saying that he's not saying, I don't know, before I met you, I never jacked off. I want you to take a listen to that.
Yeah, you are right, though, that in the bath. Oh,
Oh, when we took a bath together? That was surreal, like, honestly. And I think, maybe the candlelight and the bubbles all had something to do with it, but you were amazing. You made me feel like a goddess. Like, I wasn't saying you were, like, worshiping me, but you made me feel like I was the most freaking beautiful woman on the whole planet. Like, I so felt like I was the goddess. And so, aside from all those warm, fuzzy feelings, but like, it was so sexy, and it was so hot, and oh, gosh.
Well, that wasn't hard to make you feel that way, because you were freaking, you were hot. You are. Seriously, honey, I don't want to court you right now for that, because I'm touching yourself.
I am already.
I just started.
I wish those were my hands giving you a hand job.
Honey, so, you know, like, before I met you, I never jacked off.
Did you hear that?
Yes.
He said, honey, before I met you, I never jacked off, right?
Yes.
And you have no reason to doubt that, do you?
Objection calls.
I have plenty of reason to doubt that. Yes, I do have reason to doubt that.
And you're basing your previous statements to us about him being with other women on what he told you, right?
Yes.
And yet we have him here via this technical medium telling us that he never jacked off before he met you. Isn't that what he's saying?
Yes.
And so what you're saying is that, well, I'll believe him when it's to my benefit, but I won't believe him when it's not.
Objection, this characterizes a testimony. We're talking about apples and oranges, sex versus masturbation.
Overruled. You may answer the question.
I don't know, because I don't think that's to my benefit or not, either way.
Well, what you're saying to me is, I'll believe him when he tells me that he's having some sort of intimacies with other women. You told us that you believe that, right?
Yeah.
And you
I do.
believe that without talking to the women, right?
Yes.
Yet, when we hear him in court saying that he never masturbated or jacked off before he met you, you're saying you won't believe that, right?
Based on what he's also
Yes
told me,
or
then
no?
that would be no, because he has jacked off.
Yes or no? You won't believe what he just said there, right?
It wasn't consistent, so no.
So no, you don't believe him, right?
No, I don't believe that.
And in fact, with regard to this recording, the person that was recording it was you, right?
Yes.
It wasn't him, right?
No.
And you're saying that it was for his benefit, though, right? That's what you told us on direct examination, right?
No, I didn't say for his benefit. It was for us to listen to.
Well, it was actually for your benefit, wasn't it?
I don't see how.
Well, in terms of who had control of it, that was you, right?
Control of the recording?
Yes, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a recording that you made on May 10th of 2008. Are we clear on that?
Yes.
That recording was in your control, right?
Yes.
It was never in Mr. Alexander's control, was it?
No.
So that if anybody was going to enjoy that recording, it was you.
No.
Well, if anybody had it, it was you then, right?
I had it, yes.
And if anybody wanted to hear it again, that would be, the only person that could do that would be you, right?
That's not right.
How is it that Mr. Alexander could hear it if you were the only person who had it?
That's what we were trying to figure out, how to replay it for him.
Ma'am, you still had control of it though, didn't you?
For about a week, I did.
Well, yes or no, did you have control of it?
Yes, for a week.
You keep saying for a week. Are you saying that you then gave it to him?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
All right, so, but you did have control of this recording in the sense that it was in your telephone, right?
Yes.
It was never in Mr. Alexander's possession, right?
No.
So if anybody wanted to listen to it, they would have to go through you, right?
At that time, yes.
Well, what time do you think we're talking about, ma'am?
I'm talking about for the week following the recording.
I'm talking about...
Beyond that, then the answer would be no.
The week following the recording, you keep referencing that. Did something happen to the record? Did you give the recording to Mr. Alexander after a week?
No.
Did you give this recording to Mr. Alexander after 2 or 3 weeks?
No, I never gave it to him.
That's true. So if anybody was going to enjoy this recording, it wasn't Mr. Alexander because he didn't have control of it, right?
That wasn't the purpose of the recording, so that would
Did
be
I
no.
ask you what the purpose of the recording was, ma'am?
No.
I asked you if anybody was going to enjoy the fruits of this, whatever it was, it would have been you, right?
It would have been Travis.
Oh, so Travis was going to enjoy it even though he had no control over it, right?
I don't know how to answer that.
Why don't you know how to answer that?
Because
You're
the way
one
your
that-
question is
Ma'am,
phrased.
excuse me. You were the one that was in control of it, right?
Yes,
And you were the one that actually created that recording, right?
we both created the recording.
Well, no, that's not true. Was he pushing the button over and over to keep this recording going? Or
No, I
was that
was.
you?
I was.
So you created it then, right?
I recorded it, we both created it together.
No, you recorded it, which means that's how it came into being. He had nothing to do with the recording, did he?
I don't agree with that.
Overruled.
No, I don't agree with that.
So you're saying that somehow he was pushing a button in Mesa so that this recording would come about? Is that what you're saying?
That's not what I'm saying.
Well, technologically speaking, ma'am, the only person that was in control of creating this recording was you, right?
That's correct.
And he was a player, if you will, or one of the protagonists in this little tete-a-tete, whatever went on, right?
That's correct.
And so he didn't even know he was being recorded.
That's not correct.
Well, does he ever say at any point in that whole recording that we ever hear, could you record this for me? He doesn't say that, does he?
No, it was already recording.
Ma'am, does it say in that recording any words from Mr. Alexander that say anything to the effect that he knows that he's being recorded?
I don't think so.
When you say you don't think so, you were there when it was actually created, right?
Yes.
You were here when it was played, right?
Yes.
So you're familiar with this, right?
Yes.
And nowhere is there any indication that Mr. Alexander even knew that he was being recorded, right?
No, I don't think either of us say anything about it being recorded.
And you didn't tell him throughout this whole, from what we heard, you didn't tell him that he was being recorded, right?
I wouldn't have needed to. We already knew.
Ma'am, yes or no?
No.
In this recording, did you tell him that he was being recorded?
I answered no.
So, and you had this recording for whatever purposes you wanted to use it, right?
Yes.
You could have posted it on the internet if you wanted to, right?
In theory, yes, I could have.
Well, that can be done. You know how to do that, right?
No, I didn't know how to get anything off the phone at that time, but if that was my goal, I could have figured that out.
Sure. And this recording that you had, for whatever reason, you chose not to erase it, right?
Not for a week.
Did you erase it after a week? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't have the opportunity. So no, I did not erase it after a week.
Pardon?
No, I didn't.
So, and you just said something about you didn't have an opportunity to erase it after a week. If this was on the 10th, what happened on May 17th that prevented you from having it erased?
Well, it may not have been exactly a week. I think it may have been the 18th instead of the 17th. But I believed that my phone was stolen, and it was actually lost for about, well, a few years. It didn't.
So according to you, this phone was stolen for approximately a couple of years, right?
Yes, I reported it stolen with the police, and I had insurance on the phone, so they replaced a new one for me.
And then it resurfaced, right?
Yes.
And, you know, yesterday when we talked about this issue involving recordings and that sort of thing, and specifically involving Mr. Alexander's penis, one of the things that you told us was that, well, yes, I was the one that downloaded it onto the hard drive of my computer, right? Do you remember telling us that?
Yes.
If you would have been offended, ma'am, you could have deleted that photograph, right?
If I was offended.
Yeah, you could have, but you didn't do that, right?
Right, I wasn't offended.
Now, in terms of this recording, it also gives us a view into what your views are about the sexual relationship that you had with Mr. Alexander, doesn't it?
Yes.
And in fact, in it, you indicate that you want to blossom sexually, right?
Yes.
And that he's the person that you want to help you blossom sexually, correct?
I didn't say want, I said I have with him, and that I would like to in the future with somebody else.
Well, let's take a look so that we're totally clear about what you said. I move for the addition of Exhibit 493.
No objection.
493 is in
You're not joking. I mean, like, there are times when we just, I'm trying to think of an example. There have been a few times where I've been bold enough to just pull you onto the bed and start, and oh my gosh, do you remember that time I came to visit you when I was still living in California, and I fell asleep on your chair next to your bed, and you just like woke me up by pulling my pants off and totally licking my pussy?
Yeah.
I was so embarrassed because I had just like got my Brazilian on, and I was like worried about what it looked like, and I was like, ah, and the lights were bright and they were on. I was all self-conscious. But I remember that was hot. I was totally tired and I was asleep. And I would have been completely content just cuddling with you once we got into bed, but you had another agenda.
You gotta admit though, like, there's not many guys that would do that just for fun.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, I don't know what the ratio is, but I get the impression that I mean, it's kind of an awkward subject to bring up, but yeah, eventually we're both going to remarry people, and I just get the feeling that there aren't a lot of Mormon guys like that. And there may or may not, I'm sure there are plenty of freaky Mormon girls, but are they the marrying type? I shouldn't say that. I'm just saying, are they the type that you'd want to marry, or are the guys out there the type that I'd want to marry? And I don't know, like, I really would like to marry a return missionary, but like you, someone who can be freaky. Like, I just worry about that. There are plenty of nice people out there, but I worry that I might feel like a wilting flower is all, who never really blossomed to her full potential, at least in the sexual realm. I feel like I have with you, but like I still have plenty of blossom time left, and I want to live all those years being that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, I'm going to enjoy your blossoms and let them out there.
Yeah.
I'm going to tie you to a tree and put it in your ass, by the way.
What's that?
I'm going to tie you to a tree and put it in your ass, by the way.
Oh my gosh. That is so debasing. I like it.
Ma'am, you did hear the talk there as it started about a situation where he woke you up in a sexual fashion, didn't he?
Yes.
Do you remember on direct examination also telling us that on a previous occasion when you first had vaginal intercourse with him that he woke you up in a similar fashion, right?
Well, similarly, yes.
Well, what you told us then at that time was that you were asleep. Do you remember telling us that?
Yes.
And that he pulled your panties or whatever it was that you were wearing down below, correct?
Which time?
The time that you claimed that he placed his penis inside you.
I don't know. I wasn't awake for that. My panties were missing.
Okay, what was that now?
They were missing when I woke up.
So, but you went to bed with them on, right?
I woke up without them still, and I had to look for them.
Well, ma'am, do you remember testifying on direct examination that you had your panties on and that he took your panties off? Do you remember testifying to that?
I assumed he took them off.
Well, I'm not asking you to assume anything right now. I'm asking you whether or not you remember that that's what you testified to.
Yes, I remember that.
And as part of that encounter, one of the things that you told us was that he went inside you, right?
Yes.
And he didn't have permission, right?
I guess technically not.
Well, no, not technically. That's what you told us. Do you remember telling us that?
I remember my attorney asking me if
Ma'am, I'm not asking you what your attorney asked you. I don't care about his questions. I care about your answers. My question to you, isn't it true that you responded or told us that he was doing it without your permission and that you didn't like it?
I don't remember that. I don't remember characterizing it that way.
And so you did like it when he went inside you?
Objection as characterized as a testimony. She was asleep.
It wasn't really like or dislike. I was just worried is all.
You say that you're worried. So, my question to you is, if you liked it or didn't like it, did you express any preference either way to Mr. Alexander?
I don't think I did.
Did you forget what you told us that you did after that?
I said his name after that.
And then what, after that, what did you remember that you told us that you did?
That he, well, when I said his name and I kind of tried to get out from underneath him, his thrusts quickened, and then after that, we sort of broke apart and he pushed my head under the covers.
Right. So that's the same, we're talking about the same encounter, right?
Yes.
And it was consensual, though, even though you were asleep, wasn't it?
Objection, Your Honor, that mischaracterizes the law.
Overruled. You may answer.
Well, I didn't object to it.
So if you didn't object to it, it meant it was consensual, right?
Objection, Your Honor, mischaracterizes the law. She was asleep.
Approach. Proceed.
You thought it was okay when he placed his penis inside you while you were asleep, right?
Yes, maybe just not morally, but other than that, I thought it was okay.
Ma'am, is it yes?
It's yes and no, but mostly yes, I guess.
The no part in you, that didn't report it to the police, right?
That wouldn't have been the no part. So
So
no.
the no part that didn't want it, that didn't get on the telephone and call the police, did it?
Of course not, no.
So the answer is no, you didn't call the police, right?
That's the answer.
You didn't stop the sexual encounter at that point either, did you?
I attempted to stop the intercourse, but not the whole sexual encounter.
So the answer is no, you didn't stop the sexual encounter, correct?
Correct.
In fact, you continued on with the sexual encounter until you tell us there was a sexual release on his part, right?
Yes.
You never indicated to him afterwards not to do that, right?
No.
And in fact, what we just heard was you lauding him or praising him for waking you up, engaging in intercourse, oral intercourse with you, right?
Yes.
So it's the same thing, only something different is going inside your body without getting too graphic, isn't it?
Well, I was awake when there was any kind of penetration on that account, so
Well, no.
it's somewhat similar, I would say.
Ma'am, do you want to hear this again where you indicate that you say you woke me up by pulling my pants off and licking my pussy?
Yes.
So he did wake you up in the same fashion, didn't he?
I was awoken as my pants were coming off. So, yeah, similar, yes.
And you didn't have any problem with that, right?
I was embarrassed, but other than that, no.
When you say that you were embarrassed, you weren't embarrassed because of the sexual act. You were embarrassed because of the fact that you had just taken some cosmetic
Yes.
approach to your pelvic area, correct?
Yes, and the lights were bright, yes.
Right. But other than that, you didn't have any objection to it, right?
That's right.
And you wanted to continue to blossom, right?
Yes.
And you wanted to continue, and you wanted to blossom sexually, right?
Yes.
So that when we hear, for example, that there was this situation where, of the many that you've described, where he comes over to your house, for example, on the porch, and you guys do whatever it is that you do, that's part of the blossoming process, isn't it?
I would say so.
And all the other activity that occurred between the two of you, including, for example, this telephone call that took place between two consenting adults, that's also part of the blossoming process, right?
I guess so.
Well, no, you were there, right?
Well, I'm talking about sex, and I didn't have sex while I was on the phone, so,
And you told us that for you it takes two hands, right?
yeah.
And so with regard to this particular conversation, you just didn't have any fun at all, right?
No, I wasn't saying that.
Well, your words and your demeanor speak for themselves on the telephone, correct?
Yes.
And one of the other things that we know from that conversation in terms of your blossoming is that you and Mr. Alexander discussed making a movie, right?
Yes.
And you discussed making a sexual movie, correct?
Yes.
And it wasn't like you were telling him, no, I don't want to do that sexual movie. You actually were into it as much as he was, right?
Yes.
And in fact, as part of this sexual blossoming, there are other things that you asked him to do for you, didn't you?
Yes.
Let's take a look at some of them. Take a look at Exhibit 494. Recognize that?
Yes.
These are two text messages that you sent to Mr. Alexander, correct?
Yes.
What is the date of those?
The date is February 25th.
And there is a time there, but as you previously told us when you first testified on direct, that time is 7 hours ahead of what the real time is, correct?
That's correct.
Move to the admission of Exhibit 494.
Objection.
494 submitted.
Let's take a look at what 494 says. This is you sending him this text message, right?
Yes,
And this was part of the relationship that you had with him, right?
that's right.
There was a sexual component to it, wasn't it?
Yes,
And it was always a component that you partook of as much as he did, right?
yes,
And in it you say, if you're a lucky boy and you promise to give me a good, well-deserved spanking, and then there's a period there, right?
yes,
And then you also say, maybe you could give my ass a too much needed pounding too. Kidding, correct?
yes,
You're kidding about the second portion, but not the first portion, correct?
yes.
Take a look at Exhibit 495. Do you recognize that series of text messages?
Yes,
And those also involve some sexual activities between the two of you, correct?
yes. Well, ones we're anticipating,
Pardon?
ones we're planning on.
And the date on this is February 26th of '08, correct?
26th?
Well, let me have you look at it. At least that's what it says.
It would have been the 25th, but it says the 26th.
And that's because of the 7-hour issue that we've talked about before.
That's right.
I move for the admission of Exhibit 495.
No objection.
Submitted.
Take a look at Exhibit 495. You start out by saying, oh my gosh, this is so freaking hot, I want to lick it up, and then sit on it, you are so tasty, my goodness, correct?
Yes,
You were talking about his penis, right?
yes, he sent me a photo of it.
And it appears he did send you a photograph, correct?
Yes,
You were not offended by him sending you a photograph, correct?
no,
Even though we had a photograph here that was introduced, it was the same sort of photograph as the one that was introduced at trial, right?
yes,
Nothing different than the one that was here that was introduced. In other words, it was his penis and whatever was happening with it, correct?
in that regard, nothing was different.
And in fact, he then said, I'm glad you like it, right?
Yes,
And then you said, oh yes, I want to fuck you like a dirty, horny little schoolgirl, right?
yes,
So the schoolgirl issue here in this conversation is being brought up by you, not by him, right?
that's right.
And in fact, this issue about the schoolgirl that may have been presented as part of the conversation on May 10th of 2008, well, you were enjoying it too, weren't you?
I don't think we said schoolgirl on the tape.
Pardon?
I don't think I said schoolgirl on the tape, but as far as that goes, yes.
Yeah. You like dressing up like a horny little schoolgirl, for lack of a better term, right?
Well, I think I said on direct I didn't have a schoolgirl outfit, but it was kind of, that was the idea.
You did enjoy dressing up for him, right?
Yes,
And you enjoyed, at least indicating here, in February of 2008, that it had to do with looking like a little schoolgirl, correct?
I guess so, yeah.
Well, no, you keep saying you guess so, but isn't that what you wrote?
I didn't say look in that text message.
Pardon?
You said looking like, and I don't see that in the text
All
message.
right, so, okay, let's read it. I want to fuck you like a dirty, horny little schoolgirl. So that implies that you are dressed up in a certain fashion, right?
Yes,
And it also implies that, or indicates that it's you that's the person that likes this sort of activity and looking like a horny little schoolgirl, right?
yes,
Although we heard previously some talk about braids and that it was only him that wanted that. It was a consensual, mutual relationship, sexually speaking, wasn't it?
yes, always.
This issue involving the idea that there was going to be a movie and what was going to happen in the movie, part of it, or what it took place during a conversation that you had on May 10th of 2008, right?
Yes,
And it can be characterized as phone sex, correct?
yes,
And it can also be fair to say that what people say during phone sex isn't necessarily true. Wouldn't you agree to that?
I would agree to that.
Well, ma'am, what you said in your phone sex conversation with Mr. Alexander, according to your own testimony, part of it was a lie, wasn't it?
Are you talking about how he never jerked off?
No, I'm talking about what you said in that conversation. What you said, part of what was going on was a lie, wasn't it?
Yes, part of it was a lie.
Sure it was a lie, right? And so at least if we're using this conversation as a point of reference, people, you and Mr. Alexander, but you specifically, you lied to him, right?
I did.
And there was no harm in it because it was just a fantasy kind of conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just fantasy.
Right, and so that if he says he wants to tie you up to a tree and stick it up your ass, that could also be seen as fantasy, right?
Yes.
That never happened, did it?
No.
And talking about, for example, these things about the movie and that sort of thing, whether or not you believed it or not, it was part of the fantasy of that conversation, wasn't it?
Yes.
So, for example, if you just listen to one of these snippets or one of these exchanges, we can see that perhaps it's just all a fantasy. Let me have this marked as an exhibit. I move for the admission of exhibit 496.
No objection.
496 is admitted.
And ma'am, before we listen to it, in this particular excerpt, you would actually indicate that you believe that maybe this making of this movie could be artistic. I want you to listen to that.
I was saying, I'm kind of envisioning one, like when you're kitty fucking me, but like I'm looking with my head tilted back, so all you can really see is like the outline of my chin and some of my cheek and jawbone, and like my ears and hair, but you can't really see the rest of my face. You could just see a dick between two tits, like in focus with the neck and everything sort of a little bit blurry, but they're like kind of artistic, you know what I'm saying?
That's great.
Yeah, I don't know if we could do that because your legs may take up the spot where the camera should be, but I think we could get something like that. Or vice versa. Ooh, I've got more ideas. Okay, go ahead.
Well, we'll work that out. Worst case scenario, we could do it from like the reverse angle where
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like the other way.
Mm-hmm. And we could still blur my face and put your cock in stuff. You have a good-looking dick, baby. I just want to let you know.
You like my dick?
Yeah. It's like, it just, so smooth. And it goes so, the first time you fucked me, it felt so good. So you went just where I needed it. Just went where I just needed it bad. You fucked me so right.
You do say that it could be an artistic endeavor, right?
Yes.
And in fact, that comes from the fact that you like to take photographs, correct?
Yes.
And that's sort of one side of your life that you have, correct?
Yes.
And so, again, the fact that you're talking about it doesn't mean that you're actually going to do it, right?
We were kind of tentatively planning it, but I don't know whether we were actually going to do it or not.
Right, and it's a situation, again, that sometimes when people are involved in a sexual situation like what this appears to be, they get caught up in the heat of the moment, and they say things that are related to what's going on, correct?
I would agree with that.
And during this conversation, you and he actually discussed whether or not you guys should stop this particular activity of having sex, don't you?
Stop having sex?
Or stop having sex, stop having phone sex, that sort of thing.
I think we did, yes.
Well, let's hear what you actually said. I move for the admission of exhibit 497.
No objection.
497 is admitted.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to get pictures of jizz on your face.
That's gonna be cool, actually. It's gonna be.
Try to get one as I'm coming on your face. And then,
Yeah, definitely.
like mid-shot.
Mm-hmm. think about having sex with you every day, several times a day. I think about how it feels to have your cock deep inside of me. I remember it, and I want it again.
Is it wrong that I'm glad we started fucking?
What?
Is it wrong that I'm glad that we started fucking?
Well, if it's wrong, then I don't want to be right. Because I'm glad too. Like, seriously?
Internally, I'm like, okay, it's Jodi, I'm just Jodi, I'm small, Jodi.
Like, I don't know. What's wrong is that I wish we were doing it before. Because
Yeah.
that was good, and it's
Once we did it, why not do it? Yeah.
I know what you mean.
And it appears that there's a bit of a conflict because the two of you keep engaging in sexual activity, correct?
That's correct.
Whether it be by telephone or whether it be in person, correct?
Yes.
And this issue involving you and he having sex, it also created a conflict for him, right?
Yes.
And you knew that it had to do with the LDS faith, right?
Yes.
And you were also LDS, and that created a conflict for you too, right?
Yes.
And so it wasn't a situation that it was a secret to both of you that perhaps, since you were both members of the LDS faith, this is not what you should be engaging in, right?
That's right.
But neither of you cared, right?
Objection, House of Speculation.
Sustained.
Ma'am, you still continue to engage in sexual activities with him, even though you had this conflict, didn't you?
Yes.
And even though he says he has this conflict here, he still continued to have sex with you, right?
Yes.
So even though you were two conflicted persons, you still continued to engage in this activity, right?
Yeah, that's what the conflict was about.
Right. And in fact, you even had a description of the two of you, didn't you, in that conversation that we just heard from May 10th of 2008, don't you?
Yes.
Let's hear what you said. I move for the admission of 498.
No objection.
498 is admitted.
That's right. I asked you not to, so I could get in the... Hang on, I thought I heard somebody. Let me just double check. Oh, I think it was my charger. All right, we're good. This coast is clear. Let me get back into the groove of things.
Honey, the pictures I'm going to take are so hot. Enabled.
Like, what are we going to do with ourselves? We are just horny toads.
Ma'am, that's just an acknowledgement there that both of you are into each other sexually, correct?
That's correct.
And there's no indication from anything that we've heard that you were offended by the physical sexual activities that were going on, right?
Right.
It may have been a conflict, but the two of you enjoyed each other. Or at least you enjoyed him as much as it appeared that he was enjoying you, right?
Yes.
And you had at least that kind of relationship to the point where you actually had a name for him, or a pet name for him, didn't you?
Yes.
Let me show you this exhibit. Take a look at exhibit 499. Do you recognize it?
Yes.
It's a text message that you sent, right?
Yes.
What's the date?
The date is 21st. Actually, it would have been the 20th of January.
And you're saying that it was the 21st of January because of the time difference, right?
Yes, it was the 20th, but it shows the 21st.
Move for the admission of exhibit 499.
No objection.
499 is admitted.
And that's you sending him a message saying, hey, Hadi Biscotti will you call me before you hit the sack, right?
Yes.
I have a question about tomorrow morning. Thanks, my dear, correct?
That's correct.
And you actually called him Hadi Biscotti, correct?
Yes.
And that's because he was, in part, because he was special to you, right?
Yes.
Because apparently at that time you were in love with him, right?
I believe I was. Yes.
And it's something that two people who are intimate have in common, right?
Yes.
But he really wasn't that special to you, was he?
I wouldn't say that.
Well, let's take a look at another exhibit. 287. This is to Ryan Burns. You see that? It says Ryan's PPL, Gmail.
Right.
You're me. You see that?
Yes.
And you say to him, at some point before you go meet him, hey, Hadi Biscotti, what's new, right?
Yes.
Isn't that the same thing that you called Mr. Alexander?
Yes, I called a lot of people that.
So what you're saying is, when you call that Mr. Alexander that, it didn't mean anything then?
I wouldn't say it was meaningless, no.
It could also mean that when you started calling Mr. Burns Hadi Biscotti, was that Mr. Alexander really didn't mean that much to you, right?
That's not what it meant.
Well, it could, though, based on what we see.
She's answered the question.
Sustained.
You called them both by the same name, right?
Yes.
And you only had one encounter with Mr. Burns, correct?
Well, I met him once, and then I saw him again, so that would be twice. But if you're talking about the physical encounter, yeah,
Right.
one time, I guess.
Yeah, one time, right?
Unless you count shaking his hand, which I guess that doesn't really
Pardon?
count.
I didn't hear what you said.
I'm sorry, unless you count we shook hands and spoke briefly. I don't even really remember it, so it was pretty brief, but
In terms of a one-on-one with
Yes,
Mr.
that
Burns,
would
it
be
was only
one.
one time, right?
yes,
And you're already calling him Hadi Biscotti, at least through this PPL, or at least through this instant messaging thing, right?
that's right.
And exhibit number 286, it tells us a little bit more of what actually happened when you went to see him. I want you to go down here and read what he says, starting with the ha-ha, if you can read it. If not, I'll bring it in. Go ahead and read it out loud.
It says, haha, well, we woke up, we sat there for a bit, and then we held each other, and then we started to kiss. Then you said I could not be comfortable, and you adjusted me.
So it does say that you told him that he could not be comfortable, and so you adjusted him, right?
Yes.
And then what else does he say? It's above it.
Then you pressed your body really close to mine and started to kiss me.
So you were on top of him, weren't you?
Yes, well, kind of on top of him off to the side a little. I think on his left.
But you did start to press your body close to him, right?
Yes.
And then you say what? It's right above it.
Well, I think it's out of order, but I say, well, I would gladly give it to you.
And then right above it, he asks.
Can I ask what else you might give me?
And your answer is?
You can ask, but you'll have to wait and see for that one.
Bottom line, you're sort of already involved in the same sort of give and take that you were involved with Mr. Alexander, correct?
Yes.
Ma'am, there's a number of stories that you gave in this particular case involving the killing. There was one that you gave on the 15th of July of 2008 to Detective Flores, right?
Yes.
There's another one that you gave on July 16th of 2008 to Detective Flores, right?
Yes.
But then you still gave another view of what happened to 48 hours, right?
I think I was inconsistent in my lies. Yes.
So let's take a look at what you may have said 48 hours. I move for the admission of Exhibit 500.
No objection.
500 is admitted.
You feel comfortable talking
Yeah,
about it?
let me talk about, I'll talk about this, and nobody knows this. the detectives know this because I've spoken with them. Boy, this is really hard. I'm trying to think if I want to say this or not. There is a lot of evidence that places me at Travis's house the day he was, or not just the day he was killed, but the day, that most of that week. And there is a reason for that, and that reason is that that I did see Travis the day that he passed away, and a lot of things happened that day. I almost lost my life as well, and I was told that I can't speak about it or tell anyone about it because my family's life was in danger over it. I was told that if I did, that they would all die and that I would die. And that was kind of the end of the story. There was an argument among some people, two individuals, that one wanted to take my life, and one said, that's not why we came. And at one point, the guy with the gun sort of succumbed to her pressure, I think, because he was holding the gun at my forehead, and I was on the ground, on my knees, and I was near the armoire of where he kept his TV in his bedroom, and Travis was in the bathroom. She was standing over Travis near him, and the guy with the gun was standing near me, and again, this argument was going on back and forth. And I just remember holding my head and closing my eyes. And then there was so much that went on that day, but the short of it is he pulled the trigger and nothing happened, just a click. And I realized then that he probably, I don't know if that means that he was out of bullets, or I don't know what that means. I wasn't that familiar with handguns. And so at that point, I pushed past him and I ran down the stairs. He didn't make much of an effort to stop me. But I could almost swear that I heard someone following me down the stairs, and I ran out the front door, and I got into my car, and I drove, and I left.
Ma'am, nowhere in that recitation or in any of the interviews that you gave with 48 Hours did you ever indicate that you had memory loss, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, you gave a slightly different view of the same event to 48 Hours on another occasion, didn't you?
Yes, couldn't keep my story straight.
I move for the admission of Exhibit 501.
No objection.
501 is admitted.
Again, I was looking down and going through some photos. He is really critical of himself. We're all our own worst critics, and so, some pictures he liked, some he didn't. And I was looking through the pictures, and I heard, again, a loud pop, and I was hit on the back of the head. I don't think I was out very long, but when I came to, I was kind of laying next to the bathtub and the shower right next to each other. And Travis was on all fours on the tile, and he was, well, I say all fours, but one of his hands was actually holding his head. And I mean, he wasn't laying down or anything. He was kind of on his knees and on the, on his hands. And at that point, I looked over toward the entrance of the bathroom. There was a hallway, and two people were walking down the hallway, and I ran into the closet. It's a big closet. And I was going to run out the other door, except he stopped me with a gun pointed at my forehead. And I was just, when you have a gun pointed to your forehead, you just do anything. So he told me to get down onto my knees and stand over or sit over by the armoire. So I just stayed there, squatting on my knees next to the armoire. And he left the room for a minute, maybe a few minutes. and she was in the bathroom, standing over Travis, and I charged her. I ran down that hall and I pushed her as hard as I could, and she fell over him, landed near the sink. There's 2 sinks in the master bath, and he landed near the left sink, near the trash can, close to the windows, and I started to pull on him, and I said, "Come on, come on, come on, let's go, let's go." And he just wasn't. He was sluggish and lethargic, and he just wasn't getting up, and he wasn't really saying much of anything. He was there, and he was conscious, and I could see that. He wasn't saying much. I was able to get him about, he was sort of not crawling, but he was kind of moving and trying to stand up. And I was able to get him about halfway down the hallway when she came back at me, and we struggled for a few minutes. And again, she was doing what she could to overpower me, and she was kicking me, and she was stomping on my feet, and she was trying to kick my knees, and I was just kind of bending them or trying to do what I could. And he came back in the room, and again, I had to go back to where I was sitting and stay there, and that's when they both began to argue about whether or not I should die. And there was an argument that went on back and forth between them for several minutes. At least it felt like several minutes. And he didn't want to, and she did, and she kept saying why they should, and he kept saying, well, that's not why we came here, and you know, after he had gone through my purse again, he finally just pulled the trigger, and I thought, honestly, it's over. It's the weirdest feeling to think that it's going to be over at any second, and then someone pulls the trigger, but you're still there. And at that point, I just ran. I pushed right past him, and I flew down the stairs. And like there's part of I wasn't even in my body. I think I was, but everything felt numb. I was hyperventilating, and my heart was racing. And so even as I went down the stairs, there's part of me, like my brain was telling my legs, don't screw up, or you're going to fly down these stairs, and you're not going to get away. So I'm, trying my best not to stumble down these stairs, and I just went out as fast as I could and out the door and slammed the door behind me and got in the car and left.
And that's another version of the events that occurred on June 4th of 2008, correct?
Yes.
And they're not true.
Neither of them. Well, it's all the same thing. It's just different versions. Couldn't keep my life straight.
So the answer is they're not true, right?
Neither of them, yes.
Ma'am, you did also continue to talk to 48 Hours about coming to Mesa. Do you remember talking to them about that?
Yes.
And do you remember talking to them about what your plans were initially? Do you remember about that?
Yes.
And the reason that you came out to Mesa, you didn't have a plan initially, correct?
Do you mean on June 4th?
Pardon?
Are you talking about on June 4th?
I'm talking about when you left Wairika.
What was your question? I'm sorry.
My question is, according to you, you didn't have any plans to come to Mesa initially when you left Wairika, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, that's something that you told 48 Hours, right?
Yes.
Take a look at what you told them. For the admission of Exhibit 502.
No objection.
502 is admitted.
So tell me about this trip on this particular day. Did you plan that in advance, or did you surprise
No,
them?
I'm really kind of like go by the wind when I take my road trips. I usually plan more than I can actually do, and then I cross some off the list when I feel I can't. So on this last trip, my plan was to go to Monterey, to Los Angeles, to San Diego, to Utah, and then over to Death Valley, and then back up to Wairika. And it certainly didn't go anything like that. It went Santa Cruz, and then Monterey. And then I went to LA and Pasadena. And then I skipped San Diego. And it was when I was in Pasadena that night that I decided to go to Mesa. And Travis had found out about my road trip about a week prior, and he has this way of kind of guilting me, not in a bad way, just like of making me sort of feel bad. So he said, well, why don't you come to Mesa instead, and you can visit me. And I was like, no, you know, I have other things that I need to do and other plans and other people. I didn't say it in that way because you have to kind of be delicate about it. Otherwise, you know, he would take offense, I think. And so he would say things like, okay, I see, whatever. I see how it is. You don't love me, you know, just as a joke, though. And so it just kind of pulls on my heartstrings a little. And again, I was weak and I folded and I decided that I'm going to go. And so I called him when I was in Pasadena and said, guess what? And he said, what? And I said, I'm coming to Mesa. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. He's like, all right, cool. And so, you know, we hung up the phone and I drove. And I told him he didn't have to wait up for me because, you know, I was still in Pasadena, and that's probably a good 5 hours and something, just all the way to Mesa. So, and as well as that, my phone was about to die. So, you know, I just said, you know, if I don't speak to you again until I get there, then, you know, that's why. And so I showed up, I think, around 4 a.m. And he was still awake. He had stayed up all night. He was on the internet looking up some videos on YouTube, some silly videos. And we watched some more videos for a little while. And then it was just like I was exhausted from the drive. So we just went to bed and went to sleep. And, you know.
With regard to the videos that he was looking at, we've heard something about quicker, faster, stronger, something like that. They weren't of any sexual nature, were they?
No.
And in fact, it may have been the way you described it, that it was some people with some sort of weird or funny headgear that were just dancing around. That's the way you described it, right?
It looked that way, yes.
And so you actually left Wairika on June 2nd of 2008, correct?
Yes.
And prior to that, though, you made some preparations, didn't you?
Yes.
You made some preparations in the sense that, according to you, you made a reservation to rent a car, right?
Right.
And the reservation to rent the car was made not in Wairika, but in some other place, right?
It was made online. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, in Redding, for Redding, yes.
Right. And Wairika does have some rental car companies, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, what happened was that when you went to Redding to rent the car, you even had to, for lack of a better term, inconvenience somebody else to take you to get your car, to get the rental car, and then take you back to their house, right?
That's right.
And it would have been much more convenient in Wairika to go rent the car in Wairika, wouldn't it?
Not for my bank account, no.
Well, when you're saying your bank account, you're talking about financial reasons, right?
Right.
And how much money did you take with you in cash?
I don't recall, but it was probably a few hundred, I think.
So when you say a few hundred, are we talking about 200?
Maybe that, not much more, somewhere in that ballpark. It was between like 80 and 200. I don't remember the exact amount.
So it's between $80 and $200, maximum being $200, right?
I think. I don't really remember as far as cash.
Well, could it have been $300?
It could have. I don't remember having that much cash on me, but I guess it could have.
If you don't remember having that much cash on you, then it wasn't $300, right?
Well, it just means I don't remember. Probably not.
All right, and so previously during the direct examination, you told us that when you go on these trips, you don't take usually more than $200. Do you remember telling us that?
Yeah, that's typical.
And so in this particular case, you said, well, I had financial issues, and so I decided to rent out of Redding because it was cheaper, right?
That's right.
But it would have been more convenient, though, to rent from Wairika, correct?
Convenient for who?
You.
No.
In terms of picking up the car, it wouldn't have been convenient?
No.
Well, Wairika, you told us, was a small town, right?
Yes.
And you indicated that everybody sort of knows everybody there, right?
That's pretty much the case.
And the other thing that you told us about Wairika was that people know everybody else's business there, right?
Usually.
Right, and in fact, one of the examples that you gave us of where people in Wairika know what's going on was the example when you were 17 and you went to, or you skipped a class. Do you remember telling us that?
Yes.
It was a history exam that you had to prepare for, right?
That's right.
And you indicated that you went somewhere in the car and you were studying, right?
Yes.
And while you were studying, your father found you, right?
Yes.
And one of the explanations or reasons that you gave for that was that Wairika is a very small town, right?
I don't remember giving that explanation because that's not why he found me.
Well, you indicated that you don't know how he found you, right?
I knew how he found me.
Well, that's not what you told us on direct examination.
Oh, I mean, I knew why he went to go looking for me. How he found me was he was just driving around. I'm sorry.
Ma'am, that's not what you told us on direct examination, right?
I don't remember. That's not the fact.
Again, do you have problems remembering what you just told us less than a couple of weeks ago?
Occasionally, I guess.
And in this particular case, you're having trouble remembering what you told us as to how your father found you, right?
I'm having trouble with how you're characterizing it, I think.
Well, again, we're going to get into this word exchange issue, but my question to you is, do you remember telling us on direct examination that Wairika's a small town and that's part of the reason or how your father found you? Do you remember telling us that?
Yes.
And so Wairika in 2008 is not much bigger than it was in 1997 or 1998 when this happened, right?
No, I think it's about 1,000 more in population.
Right. It's only 1,000 more in population. In other words, it's not a town that's exploding in terms of population, right?
Yes.
It is or it is not.
Yes, that's right. I'm sorry.
And so that in people in Wairika, if somebody does something, more likely than not, they may end up meeting somebody that they know, right? Overruled.
Yes.
So, for example, if you went to one of the two or either of the two car rental agencies that are there in Wairika, somebody may have been able to know or talk about it later if they were asked about it, correct?
Perhaps. People wouldn't know me, though, because I hadn't lived there for 10, 15 years.
But they may have, right?
Some. A few
Because
high school
again-
friends or something.
Again, it's not a very large town, right?
Yes.
And in fact, what's the population is what, 11,000?
I think it's 7,000.
7,000?
Something, yeah.
And you, at the time, back in June 2nd of 2008, you were working, right?
Yes.
And where you were in this town, there aren't that many bars, right?
I think there are like 5 or 6 bars.
Right. And there isn't one called Margaritaville, right?
No, there's not.
You worked at Casa Ramos, right?
Yes.
And you had some time off, didn't you?
Yes.
And this was going to be part of your vacation, right?
Road trip, yes.
The road trip was your vacation, right?
It was partially vacation, partially a business trip.
And when you say partially business trip, what you're saying is, for example, that if you went to buy gas, that's something that could be deductible, correct?
If it was for the business purpose, yes, it would be deductible.
Sure. And in fact, since you were going to go to Utah, going to a gas station, it would make sense to save the receipts so that you could then deduct them from your income taxes, right?
That's right.
And in this particular case, wouldn't matter whether or not you paid cash or you paid with a credit card, right?
It wouldn't matter for tax purposes. No.
Right, as long as you had the receipts, right?
Yes.
And in this case, so you did pay at least attention to the receipts that you got, for example, from the gas station, right?
What do you mean by pay attention?
Kept them.
Yeah, I throwed everything in a shoebox.
Right, you threw everything in the shoebox, everything related to this trip, right?
Yes.
All of the receipts from this trip were thrown in this shoebox that we've seen previously, right?
No, probably not all, but just whatever was left over in my wallet.
Well, but you were trying to pay attention to keep the receipts that were related to a business expense, right?
Somewhat. I'm very disorganized, but that's kind of my effort, yeah.
Well, no, that's what you were attempting to do, right?
Yes.
And in fact, you did save some of the receipts involved with this particular trip, right?
Yes.
And so you're in Wairika and you decide instead to rent a car from Redding, California, right?
Yes.
And that's south of Wairika, correct?
Yes, on my way.
And it is on the way, but it is south, correct?
Yes.
And it's what, 90 miles away?
I think it's 99 miles.
So in terms of travel, we're talking about what? Close to 2 hours?
Maybe just under 2 hours, I think.
And on this particular day that you left, on June 2nd of 2008, you left the house around 5 o'clock in the morning, something like that, right?
Yeah, I think so. It was very early in the morning.
Well, you were at the Redding airport by 8 o'clock, weren't you?
Yes.
And so did you get there before 8 o'clock and just wait around, or did you get there at about the same, at that time?
I don't remember waiting. Well, I waited a little bit because there was a line, but not waiting for them to open.
And somebody was with you, correct?
Yes.
A guy was with you, right?
I can't remember if it was my brother's neighbor or my sister-in-law, but I think it was my sister-in-law. So either one of them dropped me off and picked me up or vice versa.
So when you're saying that they dropped you off and picked you up, what you're saying is that they did not get out of the car that took you to the Reading Airport, correct?
I don't remember.
You don't remember whether or not they went up to the counter with you.
I think I was alone.
So you were here when Mr. Colombo testified, correct, as to whether or not you were accompanied, correct?
Yes.
And so what time did you arrive at this would be your sister's house, right?
Yes.
What time did you get there?
Before renting the car, you mean?
Yes. That was the only time that you got there on June 2nd, correct?
No, I got there with the rental car afterward and
Pardon?
took a nap. No, I went back to our house.
All right, the first time before you rented the car.
In the morning. I don't remember the exact time.
So it would have been, and they knew you were coming, correct?
Yes.
And so they were ready to then take you down to the airport, right?
Yes.
And they dropped you off, and then you went to pick up the car, right?
I believe they did, yes.
And one of the things that happened is that you initially were given a car, or rented a car by Mr. Colombo.
Yes.
Colombo, correct?
Yes.
And the car that he offered you initially was red, right? And you told him
Yes.
that you didn't want the red car, right?
That's right.
And the reason that you told him that you didn't want the red car was because it would call attention to or it would stand out more, correct?
No.
Well, didn't you tell him that you did want to exchange the car though, right?
Yes.
And you told him that red is a color that police officers sort of focus on. Do you remember telling him that? Is that yes or no?
I'm trying to remember. I don't think I worded it that way.
So you did give him a reason why you didn't want that car, right?
Yeah.
And part of it had to do with the color, right?
Yes.
You didn't want the color red,
Yes.
correct? The color red seems to stand out, doesn't it?
I don't know. I just heard they get more tickets.
Right, and so it had to do with the police department, right? You did not want to stand out, and that's why you wanted a different color, correct?
Not the police department because I'd be on the freeway. I just didn't want to get tickets, and I
Well-
heard they get more tickets.
Who do you think gives traffic citations, ma'am?
On the freeways in California, it's the California Highway Patrol.
That's police, aren't they?
I don't think they're police. I think they're law enforcement, but not categorized as police. Not to my knowledge, anyway.
So if there's a crime, you're saying that the California Highway Patrol doesn't respond to them?
They respond as well as maybe the sheriff's office or something. Depends on the district, I would imagine.
Right, and so you were afraid that police, whether it includes the California Highway Patrol or somebody driving down the street, that they would focus in on your car because you had heard that police get more tickets involving a red car, correct?
Afraid? No, I wasn't afraid. I just didn't want to shell out more money for tickets.
Right. So, afraid may not be the word that you like. What word would you like? Concerned?
I don't know. I
Well,
guess.
no, you're the one that said afraid wasn't the right word. Why don't you tell me what word you would use in describing your reluctance in taking a red car?
It was motivated by financial frugality.
Well, you're telling us then that the red car was cheaper to rent than the white car.
No, in theory, I would be less likely to get a speeding ticket and shell out hundreds of dollars if I were not in a red car.
So what you're saying is the red car, in your view, because of the color, stands out more to police departments, whether they be California Highway Patrol, whether they be the Salinas Police Department, whether they be the Reading Police Department, right?
I'd be speculating, but I guess that's why they get more tickets. I don't know.
Well, no, I don't want you to guess because I want you to tell us what you were thinking at the time because you were the one that made this request involving the red car.
Well, my thought is that drivers of red cars tend to drive faster. They get more tickets. That's just what I've always been told.
Right. But that's what other drivers do. You supposedly were going to adhere to the speed limit or within 10 miles of it, right?
Usually, I tried.
Right. So if you do that, then you really shouldn't have too much of a concern about a traffic citation then, right?
That's not right. I've been cited before when the radar was off.
And how many times have you been cited before for speeding, ma'am, when your speed was over 10 miles an hour, over the speed limit?
Several times.
Give me one time.
One time I was driving on Highway 1 south of Carmel, or just entering Carmel Highlands, and I was going, I think, 60-something in a 50, and I got pulled over, and he clocked me at, he said 79.
Let me stop you. You said you were going 60-something in a 50-mile-per-hour zone, right?
Yes,
That means you were going over the 10-mile issue that I just presented to you.
yes.
So in other words, what I'm asking you, can you give me an example where you were driving either the speed limit or within 9 miles of the speed limit where you were given a ticket?
Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
We are going to take the noon recess at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, please be back in the designated area at 1:25. Please remember the admonition, you are excused.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ms. Arias, you may step down.